Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. I'm with Alyssa Bream and Zack Unkenholz today, and we are in Jeremiah 12. That was the reading, and it begins by saying this: Lord, you always give me justice when I bring a case before you, so let me bring you this complaint. Why are the wicked so prosperous? Why are evil people so happy? You have planted them, and they have taken root and prospered. Your name is on their lips, but you are far from their hearts. But as for me, Lord, you know my heart. You see me and test my thoughts. Drag these people away like sheep to be butchered. Set them aside to be slaughtered. How long must this land mourn? And we could go on, but the place I want to spend the time talking about is the very first part, which is, in my opinion, an eternal complaint. It's clearly not something new. It is something we hear today, but it's not something new. But he makes this case: why are the wicked so prosperous, and why are evil people so happy? So I want to talk about those two questions. So why do wicked people prosper? And he says something about them that I found interesting. He says God's name's on their lips, but he's not in their hearts. He's far away from their hearts, which that's a whole nother conversation. But,
you can think of some modern day examples.
Yeah. But yeah, I can think of several. But anyway, yeah, let's not go there. Why do you think wicked people prosper?
I think that I think that we see other people, we see them as wicked. Now, granted, some of these people were pretty wicked. I think there are people that I would consider maybe doing wicked things, and they may seem to be prospering or that they're happy. But I also don't think we always know the whole picture. We don't see the things that they may be dealing with. Some things they may seem to be prospering, but I mean, eternally, if eternally they could suffer, but also too, I think that there are things that we see. Sometimes we see the best in other people, sometimes we see the worst in other people, and we think, well, they're getting so much more than they deserve. But I think that I think we all deal with our own things that we don't fully understand the entire picture.
Yeah, well, let me narrow this down a little bit, okay? So that might make it a little bit easier. We could have a debate about prosperous or wealthy people in the world, and what we call prospering can mean one thing or another.
Mm-hmm.
And we can have questions about their morality or their ethics, whether they're a believer or not a believer, but, if you named people, Sam Walton or Bill Gates or, why did his name? I can see his face and I can think of his company's name. I just can't think of him. Warren Buffett.
Mm-hmm.
In general, I don't hear people, other than the fact that they consider wealth to be wicked, believe those kind of people are wicked. But there are people in the world that are wealthy and wicked.
Mm-hmm.
I can think of some dictators in the world, that are wealthy. They abuse their people. They are evil. They kill their own. There are some that are more sophisticated than others, So in Russia, they might be more sophisticated than they are in Haiti, but it's extremely corrupt. And I think there would be probably a majority of people in the world who would say that person is wicked. So when I think of wicked, that's what I think of. I don't think of people who, well, your morals don't match mine, or, I don't like the way you did that, or, the Bible says you should do it this way. That's not what I think of. When I think of wicked, I think of people who are just they will go to whatever lengths necessary to keep what they've got, and no matter who gets hurt.
I think wicked people are happy temporarily. I think that is the key, temporarily, because they're doing what they want. They are exploiting other people for their gain. They're any whim that they want to do, they're doing because they have no care or concern for other people. But I think the answer really lies in verse 14, where Jeremiah is like, how long? And then God answers, and in verse 14 says, I will uproot from their land all the evil nations reaching out. Like, God is going to take care of it. So even though they're happy, we have to remember that their happiness is temporary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is kind of the balance. And really, while they're maybe putting on happy, I don't know if I would even say dictators are happy. I don't know if they're ever happy, but like Zach said, that we don't know what's going on behind even maybe people that we consider like micro wicked in our own circle that we know that we think are doing bad things. We don't know what else is going on and that they're truly happy. I think from our vantage point, they're doing what they want and we see them as happy, but I don't think that they're actually happy.
The prospering piece and the happy piece, I find to be not always together.
Right.
You know, I have watched, I have been enamored at times with documentaries and docuseries about drug trafficking and money laundering and those kind of things. And like on the happy side, now they do prosper, but on the happy side, it's like they're just having a blast, you know? And I recognize it's temporary, but in your mind or in your heart, don't you believe or don't you want? Doesn't it feel like justice would say? Maybe that's the right thing because he talks about, you know, God, you always give me justice. Because David has these same kind of questions. God, why do the wicked prosper? You know, why do you think God allows that to happen?
So I think that, so God's timing is different than ours. And I'm going to use the example of the micro wickedness as you were talking about before. God's timing in terms of how he carries out his justice, we may not see it in our lifetime, or we may not see it come to people who we consider wicked or who pretty clearly are wicked until it may take a very long time. So in terms of the micro wickedness, an example I can think of was when I was younger, I had friends that I worked with and things like that, and who they would go out all the time. They get like super drunk and things like that, and they would have a lot of fun. And then maybe the pictures and the videos and that they look like they had a really fun time. I would not join them, and there were times when I was like they are having so much fun. I would like to be a part of that, you know. And I have students who are dealing with kind of the same thing, where their friends do things that are not good. You might not consider them wicked, but are not good, and they think like, well, why won't my parents let me do that? Or I really want to do that too, because they are having fun, and maybe they have a lot of money and they're prospering, they're doing okay. But now those same friends that I had then that I worked with, who at the time were having so much fun, they're still doing the exact same thing, but the quality of their life, and not that like I have like the highest quality life, but like I have purpose in my life, you know, I've got a family, they are still in the same rut. And I mean, like, I feel like every few months I'm hearing about someone I knew overdose, or talking about depression, or like they're asking me for money. You know, it's like these kinds of things, and it's sad to see. But at the time, in the moment, yes, they're having fun and they are prospering, and but ultimately, over time, you see like, gosh, like it's sad to see that. You know, it's sad to see what they're going through, even though they're living the same type of lifestyle, doing the same things they did before, which you could say is like a wicked lifestyle, but not wicked, like cool wicked, though they think that.
But is some of the things that we think are wicked or evil just simply our lack of understanding of who they are, what they're doing, and the entire process? And I'm going to give you an example, and maybe it'll trigger some examples in your mind. So, I want to try to make this as generic as I possibly can. So, I've been in the church world my entire life. I've seen like from the top to the bottom, you know. So I kind of know from the smallest churches what it feels like to the back rooms of some of the biggest ministries in the world. Like I have a feel for both ends of it. And but if you're not in those circles, there are sometimes things will happen and you will go, you think that that person is mean or hateful or uh, underhanded or um, doesn't have integrity because they say something or do something or they act in a way. And sometimes that's true, sometimes that's true. Other times, there it's more nuanced. So the example I would give was um, recently I was a part of this big religious event, and there were some things. There were a couple of things said. It wasn't like a lot. There were a couple of things said that if you had a particular point of view, you found them to be offensive. Like, why is this? Why is this being said here? Um, and it may even sound political, even though you could address it from a biblical standpoint. It may even sound political. Um, and in a conversation I had with somebody who was extremely offended by those references, my observation was, I said there were two things happening simultaneously. Okay, there was an appeal to people who were spiritually lost. Okay, but at the same simultaneous time, there's an appeal to people who are funding this event. And from the outside, that person looks like this hateful person. And maybe you can have whatever opinion you want to. But I have a little more nuanced view. Now, would I have taken that approach? The answer is no. That's just not my style. It's also why I'm not speaking to thousands of people. to you know, I just don't go to the extremes very often. But I had the view that, okay, I understood that while this is going on, there's also fundraising that is going on, and there has to be a certain appeal there. Does that make me feel a little uncomfortable? The answer is yes. But do I call it evil? The answer is no. And so sometimes things are a little bit more nuanced. And I can see the look in Alyssa's eyes that she may have a different opinion than I do. But those things are a little bit more nuanced than you're just an evil person or you're just a bad person. I was just curious, maybe that while I filibustered like Zach, if that gave you guys a chance to think of an opportunity that where people on the outside may have thought that's deceptive or that's wrong or that's bad, but you had a different point of view because you knew things that maybe everybody didn't know.
So I maybe because of my background, I come from a background where I'm like, everyone's wicked, everyone's evil, everyone's bad, it's only by God's grace that we can be good. And so for me, like, I just consider sin to be wicked. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. So I do believe that we are all capable of wickedness. I think that I bet there are probably a few people out there that would consider me that some of the things I've said or done like to be wicked, probably out there, and so and I would say that there are things that I have done that may be wicked, because I have sinned, obviously, we all do. And so I think that when it comes to that, I think that you could look at anybody and say, oh, that person's wicked, because newsflash, yes, we all sin, we all are. I mean, I come from the belief that we are all inherently bad, right? But it's by God's grace that we are able to be good, and that's why we need God. But I think that, so I think it's yes. I think, what was the question?
Yeah.
You're filibustering. This is only Tuesday. We're in trouble.
We got 3 more days and I can't even remember what we're talking about. I was just asking about more nuanced, because
I think there are people who are like, there are different levels of wickedness. I think there are some people who have like gone like way into their wickedness, right?
Yeah. So let me give you a couple that I can think of. So I can think of a couple of pastors. That's the world I know the most, I think, that were not living a life of integrity, and they knew it.
Mhm.
Just downright, almost abusive behavior. And I that's a strong word. It's hard for me to use, but almost abusive behavior. And my view of them and my view of the people that protected them are not the same. So the person who's committing the action and staying in this mega church or holding this position of influence, they know they're wrong, and they do need to be disciplined. Often, though, the people around them feel like the choices they're making are to protect others. Meaning, so if you've got a big ministry, man, we don't want the ministry to fall apart. Our churches does so much good in this community. We don't want the church's name to be sold.
Mhm.
We're trying to protect God's reputation. And so they go to these great lengths to insulate this evil, wicked person, if you will. And I have some sympathy for those people. I never think that's wise. I think I don't think that's wise, but I understand how you get there. I understand how you say, you know what, we want to keep the church moving. We've got a mortgage to pay. We've got staff to pay. And some of those places are so personality driven that, and there are people on the outside who may know those things and are like, God, how can you allow that to continue to happen? Or why did you allow that to continue to happen? And I think that's a lot more nuanced situation. Is the person wrong? The answer is yes. Are the people who are insulating them and protecting it, are they evil? That's a lot more complicated question, because there's a lot of emotions and thoughts that go through their mind. I don't know. Now, Alyssa, do you have some situations maybe that are a little more nuanced?
Yeah, I think the more you know about any situation, like you said, the situations where you've known some of the things that have gone on in the back rooms, and the more you know about the situation, the more sympathy and empathy I think you have for those people, because you see maybe the rock and the hard place that they had to choose between, or all the situations that led up that, this was somewhat inevitable because of X, Y, and Z. And so I think you have more sympathy, and you see the struggle that maybe they went through before that happened.
For me, I either have more sympathy,
or you're like,
I'm more resentful.
Or
like
yeah.
this, you're just downright wrong.
Right, right.
One of those two things.
Right. I think with your other example, the problem with Christianity, you see this in Israel, is when you mix religious power and political power, those two are this really bad mixture. And I think bad things happen when religious people try to have political power. And I don't think it ever ends well. So I think that is a part of what you were talking about with the event you were talking about.
And I was thinking more in money
but I think money and politics are probably wrapped up in this nice little ball and play against each other. So that is where a lot of Israel's problems came from. With they shouldn't have had a king. Like, that was not God's plan for them to have a king. And we see, throughout all of the troubles that it led to, and then we're really close to exile here.
And I just want to say that, one, we have to be careful what we call evil and wicked. I think we should try to measure that. The other thing I would say is, when evil and wickedness are present and we refuse to deal with it, we become just as guilty as the people who are committing, and so it becomes this real tension, and I think in the church world, that tension is very real, because we can marry our influence for the kingdom to influence for a king. You talked about politics, and it becomes just an ugly mess. Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. I hope you'll be back tomorrow as we continue our conversation in the book of Jeremiah.